Good evening. Glad you're tuning in. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 30 tonight. I don't know about where you are located, but it is super foggy here. So we're a little low tonight, but that's okay because you're tuning in. That makes me happy. How's everybody else? Great. Glad to hear that. All three of you. Y'all ever get tired of hearing that joke? Y'all laugh every single time I say it, and it makes me very happy. I appreciate that. All right. Genesis chapter 30 is where we're going to be. It's a very interesting chapter. A lot of deception still kind of happening and taking place. A little bit of competition between sisters because that never happens. And a lot of giving of servants for children's sake because that's the normal thing to do, right? Y'all, yeah, it is. All right, let's pray. God, thank you for a chance just to dive in your word. I thank you that it is a living document that speaks so loud. Lord, it requires us to have open and willing ears to hear what it has to say. And God, help us not to see it just for the story that it is, but help us to see it for what it tells us about you. And help us to understand you even more tonight. So I ask that as we embark on this journey tonight, that you guide the conversation, allow us to be good listeners to each other. But most importantly, help us to hear from your spirit tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. So, last week, chapter 29, we've got Jacob being duped by his soon-to-be father-in-law. He had hoped to marry Rachel. Instead, because Leah was the firstborn, she got swapped in the middle of the evening. Before everything goes down, Jacob wakes up in the morning and realizes this is not the girl I thought I was marrying, and goes to his father-in-law and says, what you did is wrong. You need to fix this. You promised me Rachel. And he says, well, why don't you stick around a little bit longer, finish out your week with Leah. I will give you Rachel at the end of the week, and then you give me 7 more years, which he does. And so we are going to catch up probably toward maybe the middle or the middle of the 7 years. We're going to carry out to the end of the 7 years. We're going to see what Jacob's response is and how he plays it out in order to get away from Laban, because he really doesn't want his family growing up around this type of behavior. So we're going to read the first 24 verses, and then we'll kind of come back and pick it apart a little bit. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. It's a very interesting statement. And she is placing the blame on her husband, seemingly. Like, you make this work. This is your fault. Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, here's my maid Bilhah. Go into her. She will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her. Then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. Now here's what's interesting. I didn't even put in the notes, but it's just now dawning on me. Rachel gives her maidservant to Jacob as a wife. In my mind, that's equal status. Wife is a wife is a wife. It's not second-class wife, first-class wife. She's his wife. But Rachel takes the child away from Jacob's new wife, Bilhah, because she's the maidservant and treats it as her own. Am I the only one that strikes awkward? Like, I don't know about you, but if I were Bilhah, I would always see Dan as my kid. I pop that joker out like, that's mine. I grew him. He came out of me. He's my kid. But Rachel says, oh, no, he's sitting on my name. I'm naming him. He's my seed. That's just wild. Wild, wild, wild. Verse 7, Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. So we know this is within a year at least. I mean, 9 months has passed. One popped out. Here we go again. Rachel said, with great wrestling, I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. It's just, again, bizarre to me that she's claiming victory over something that she hasn't done. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as wife. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher. So now Leah, who we know brought 4 sons into the world. For Jacob, her womb is closed up. She can't have any more kids for whatever reason. She sees Rachel gaining ground and gaining Jacob's love and affection because giving Bilhah to him is now bringing children in that she's claiming as her own. Leah's not okay with that. So she says, well, I'll challenge you. I'll meet your Bilhah and give you Zilpah. So she does. And now we've got 2 more boys coming that really aren't necessarily from Rachel or Leah, but they are from the seed of Jacob. And so they are considered Jacob's heritage, his tribe, the 12 tribes that we will know later on down the road. Now the story takes a little interesting turn. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Now, in our notes, it says mandrakes is kind of like an aphrodisiac. So that's why there's a little battle here. Rachel says, verse 15. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. In other words, you give me the mandrakes, and I'll let you sleep with our husband. Dude, this is so jacked up, man. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. First off, probably didn't take a lot of convincing. Second off, his first wife comes out and says, hey, I bought you for the night. You're coming in with me. He probably walked out of the field saying, what in the world is going on? What is happening? And then he probably just forgot about it because his wife wants to sleep with him. Verse 17, God listened to Leah. She conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. So now her womb is reopened. Leah said, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. I love the rationale that happens in explaining why God's blessings come, because sometimes it has nothing to do with it. So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. This poor lady, instead of being appreciated for who she is or appreciating that she is loved by God, now, because she's brought him 6 sons, she believes that this will be enough to win her husband over. So she called his name, the 6th son, Zebulun. Afterwards, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. We'll hear of Dinah later on. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. So finally, Rachel gets to have children. And she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. So a lot is happening here. So let's dive into our notes. So one of the writers talks about picturing 2 different faiths that's kind of happening here in Leah and Rachel. Leah, the unloved by all but not by God, acknowledges God through the gift of children. God is watching over me. But Rachel, who feels slighted and unseen, but is loved by everyone else. So you've got that battle of, I want to be loved by the world and loved by God, but you can't have both. It's one or the other, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. Rachel finally gets frustrated at the situation at the first part of chapter 30. And culturally speaking, for her not to have children, that is a really, really big deal. It makes it look like she's not worth anything because she can't have children. And honestly, the more you have, the better your position in the world becomes. So Jacob gives an ultimatum, she gives Jacob an ultimatum. You fix it. This is your fault. Which he says, I'm not in control of this. I mean, it's not like they aren't trying to have children. They're trying. And obviously he can make children because Miss Leah has had 4 sons already. And so Leah has the 4 boys. She's got Reuben, who is number 1, Simeon number 2, Levi number 3, and Judah number 4. So the first 4 representations of the tribes of Israel. And again, he displaces the blame as being God's issue. He says, don't look at me. You need to look at God. God is the giver of such things. I have nothing to do with it. I'm just carrying out my duties. So Rachel devises a plan to fix the situation, much like her great-grandmother or great-grandmother-in-law, Sarah. If you'll remember, Sarah couldn't have children, and she called her handmaid in, gave her to Abraham, who gave us Ishmael. And when Bilhah is given as a wife, she immediately has 2 boys. She has no trouble, which is Dan. Dan is thought of as God has vindicated me. God's fixed my issue. And then Naphtali is number 6. And with great struggle, I fought with my sister. There is a battle for Jacob, which I would imagine has always been there, and it's going to continue to always be there. And Leah, now that her childbearing has stopped again, has given her mistress or her handmaid. And Zilpah bores 2 boys, Gad and Asher. Gad is great fortune, and Asher, people are going to call me blessed because I'm able to have boys. Even though these 2 boys aren't from Leah, they are from Leah because Zilpah is her handmaid. And then we get the weird turn in the story. Reuben goes out in the harvest time, finds these mandrakes, which mandrakes, again, are an aphrodisiac. It's supposed to help with the whole process. And Leah has them. Well, Rachel knows that she's having this issue, like she can't have children. And she feels, if I could just relax and get in the mood, everything will be just fine. Let me have these things. Well, Leah's like, no way. I'm not. At least I can give Jacob kids and you can't. I know he loves you more, but he at least appreciates the fact that I can give him kids. So no, unless you give me him for tonight. And so Rachel's like, sure, I don't care. I mean, really, what does Rachel care? Rachel knows that Jacob truly loves her more than anybody else, and she wants to have kids, and she believes that this will help. So sure, go ahead, have your evening of fun, but I'm coming in right behind you. Which is so weird, right? So Leah gives them, but a cost, and she bears 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. So the womb that was closed is now reopened, and over a matter of 3 years, she's having kids. So she has Issachar, which represents the hiring of Jacob for the evening, her own husband. Zebulun, which is a gift from God. Now she believes that because she has 6 boys, she's going to be able to receive honor for her husband. And then Dinah, which is a daughter. And again, she's going to have an interesting story a little later. But then God remembers Rachel and her cry for a child, and he opens her womb for just a moment. And he gives her Joseph, which will be number 11. It's the 12th child, but 11th in boys. And she names him Joseph because God has taken away her reproach, and she's very jubilant and hopeful for the next child. She's already looking for the next one, which we know later on will be Benjamin. And that will be number 12. So Jacob has had 12 children, 11 boys and 1 girl in the last 7 years. That's a lot of kids, man. A lot of children. That's a lot of diapers. That's a lot of babies. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That would, the math wise, that would make better sense for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and that's mean, 9 months, you can have 1 or 2 every year and a half. But that's pushing it, literally. Like, that's crazy. That's very true. There was no way of stopping it. Wow.
The odd thing is, we got a genealogy, and her dad's name appears twice. By the time the first boy died, by the time he got to her dad, they used his name. Guess he run out of names in here.
Yeah, 16 kids. That's a couple. That's a couple. All right, any thoughts on those first 24 verses? Could you imagine? Having that type of sibling battle over a husband? That's just wild to me, man. That's wild. I'm glad we do it the way we do it. In a matter of 7 years. He'll have 13 later. 12. It's just 12 right now. 11 boys in a diner. Thank you.
But in the beginning of this, there's this interaction between Rachel and Jacob, but it just kind of drops off Jacob's thoughts through this whole process. And you got to kind of put yourself in that time period and think like, this is all just kind of, that's what I'm doing. And Jacob probably thought nothing more of it other than here's an opportunity for me to create a larger family and the grains to sing in.
Yeah, we laugh, giggle, like those nervous giggles, because he keeps sleeping with all the wives and having all these kids, because in our mind and the way that we live and the way that our world is and the sexualized nature that we have, I'm not sure that it was all about the pleasure time. I think it really was just building families.
It seems like it's the job. Because also,
she hired him.
Yeah.
So it's more of a transactional thing rather than a.
And also, like, we probably had livestock, and probably the more free labor.
Yeah.
So there's more than just I've just got to have kids to call my own. There's probably just a lot of practical solutions to this. So Jacob, through this whole process, was just moving right along,
doing the cultural thing.
Yeah.
Yes, can we hurry up and finish talking about this, because it's getting hot up here? Just saying. Yes, ma'am. You're fine.
So it says, complete the week for this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve me another 7 years.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that in those 7 years they have all the children. Maybe he worked for 7 years and still on the time of the day.
We'll talk about that in just a minute. And the only reason that I suggest, the question is, it's not necessarily that he had them all in the 7 years, because it just says, I'll work another 7 years. He could stay longer, but there's some language in the next couple of verses that lead us to believe that he's trying to get out of there as soon as his work order is over. That's the only reason that people suggest that it's within that 7-year period.
God's hand working. Because I know we're talking about wives and kids and everything, but it's almost like it's very poignant. You look at it and say, okay, her room was closed. Now hers was open.
Mm-hmm.
And then it closed again. And it's like over this period of time when you're having children, it's like, no, you can lay with your wife and do whatever. But you cannot have children out until God says, okay.
Now you can. Sure. Yeah, it's very interesting in the way that it does play out that way, that it's not about their tactics or the way that they're trying to plan it out. It's when God's ready, God's ready.
Each child had to be at that time when they needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, good. Let's go on to the next passage. 25 through 28. Came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you. Laban said to him, please stay if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Then he said, name your wages and I will give it. And so it seems to be based on that little short passage where he says, as soon as Rachel born Joseph, Jacob says to Laban, it's time for me to go. Maybe that means it was past the 7 years of work, and now she's had the child, and now we can go. He waited until Rachel had finished her term. Or maybe it means that Joseph was born, he was at the end, and they tried to leave immediately. Either way, it's a short amount of time that they had a ton of kids, and now the time comes where Jacob's like, I am out of here. You got to let me go. He no longer wants to remain there, and he wants to get his children away from their grandfather and his trickery. Now, that is more of an implied thought than anything else. But it's easy to see that Laban is not the most honest guy. He's a little shifty, a little different in the way that he does things. And so it's reasonable to believe that Jacob's like, I need to get back to my land, the land that God has blessed me, and it's time for me to take my family and go. So Laban knows, though, that what Jacob has done for him has been very blessed. And the only reason that Laban is doing well is because Jacob's there. And the only reason that Jacob is there is because God has him there for a purpose and for a reason. And so while Jacob is there and serving Laban, Laban has done very well wealth-wise and in livestock. And so he recognizes really quick that, yeah, you're good, but it's the God that you serve. Much like back in chapter 26 with Abimelech and Isaac. Remember, they had that deal. Look, you don't mess with us. We won't mess with you. You stay here. We know that God is blessing you, and so we want you to be a part of this. And so he simply asks, what's it going to cost me? I want you to stay. I need you to stay. What will it cost me? So here's what he says. So Jacob says to him, you know how I've served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming, and now when shall I also provide for my own house? So Jacob basically says, you know what? You're absolutely correct. You had nothing when I got here, and since I've been here over the last 14 or so years, you have a lot. God has blessed us. But Laban, everything that I have done has brought you wealth, and I have nothing to show for it. So how am I supposed to provide for my family? I can't live here with you forever. So it's time for me to go. So Laban says, what shall I give you? Jacob says, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. In other words, if you'll let me go, I'll stay and take care of your flocks just a little longer. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing there all the speckled and spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs and the spotted and speckled among the goats. And these shall be my wages. In other words, I'm going to separate. I'm going to put all the pure white ones on one side and all the ones that aren't pure white on the other side. That's what I'm going to take. You're going to keep the pure white ones. He says, so my righteousness will answer for me. So my righteousness will answer for me in the time to come. When the subject of my wages comes before you, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it is with me. So in other words, I'm going to separate the sheep and the goats. I'm going to put the spotted and the speckled and the striped ones over here, keep all the white ones over here, and I'm going to tend to these white ones. And I'm going to make you a great flock out of them because this is my wages. I'm going to take care of yours. And then when it's time for me to leave and for me to get my wages, you will know that I'm not stealing from you, because you will have all the white ones and I will have all the ones that are speckled, spotted, and streaked. Pretty simple, seemingly. So Laban removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats speckled and spotted, everyone that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So Laban thought, well, I'm gonna fix him. I'm going to separate my own, and I'm going to get them way far away from here to where they can't have anything to do with what he's getting ready to do. They're going to be 3 days down the road. He's going to stay here with mine. I've got his, and everything's going to be just fine. Now, Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. But he put his own flocks by themselves, and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Now, I am not a breeder. I don't understand how you can put a stick in front of an animal during the rut, them conceive, and then magically they come out speckled and spotted and streaked. Is it an old wives' tale? Some would say that. Is it some type of tomfoolery? Who knows? All we know is this is what was believed that would help in creating this massive amount of livestock for Jacob to have them as spotted, speckled, and streaked. And it worked. It's very interesting. So in our notes, it says, Jacob accounts for all the good growth in the livestock. Wait. Is that where we're at? Yeah. And some of them actually call it cattle, which I thought was interesting because they're not talking about cows, talking about sheep and goats. But some versions will call them cattle. So it could be just a translation issue, meaning the livestock, and it's specifically talking about the goats and the sheep. And so he says, you're going to keep the purebred goats and sheep. I'll keep the others, the speckled, the spotted, and the brown sheep and goats. You will get all the pure white ones. This is a deal that Laban just cannot pass up. And this is kind of the Oriental culture of bargaining. And he would have been looking at the whole livestock the whole time that Jacob was there. And the colored ones would have been big money and special. But for whatever reason, he wants the white ones. So Laban removes all those special sheep first and sends his boys away 3 days' journey ahead of Jacob to where there's absolutely no way that they can mix them. The deal is for Jacob to have all the spotted, speckled, and darker sheep and goats, but Laban has taken them away. So only the white sheep are left. And so if this is supposed to be something for Jacob to build his livestock, his sheep and goats, his herd, and he's only getting the brown, speckled, streaked, and spotted, but all he has is white, that's going to be a little difficult in my mind. Like, again, not a breeder. And so apparently there's a way that you can make it happen. And so it's a practice of peeling back the bark of different limbs, revealing different colors, and placing it in front of the watering trough for when these animals would come. They would be in heat. They would do their thing right there. And then lo and behold, a few months later, out comes a striped, speckled, or brown sheep or goat. And Jacob got to where he paid attention when he would put up colored rods to where we could get the desired colored sheep that he wants. But when the weaker ones would come, he wouldn't do it. Just let them procreate as normal and have the little weaker white sheep. Now, again, I don't understand all of that. I don't know why that actually works, but maybe it was just God doing something cool and neat. Maybe there is something about it. maybe that you that have sheep and goats at home, try getting a poplar stick and strip it down and put it in front of the water trough, see what happens. I have no, listen, if that really happened, that would be really neat, would it not? That'd be kind of cool. So, but Jacob is being very cautious as to who is mating with who in order to create a strong herd for himself and a lesser, weaker herd for Laban. So, again, there must be something to this, or else he wouldn't do it and it wouldn't be recorded. It would have just been, Jacob would have been smart. He would have used the right ones to procreate, and he would have gotten his herd. But there's something about the sticks that was special and neat. And so we see that his wealth consisted of servants, camels, donkeys, sheep, and goats. And that is the end of chapter 30. Any thoughts on that? I am all ears if anybody has any explanation as to the sticks. Some of you that are study this a little more than I have.
If in the matter of sticks, I kind of think God had a hand in that. He let Jacob know what he wanted done. It's basically the same thing that happened with Moses with the staff. And, all through history.
So are you implying that it's more of an obedience thing? It's not even about the sticks. It's Jacob do this, and because he did it as odd and weird, it's like build a boat. Oh, okay, I'll build a boat. And because he built the boat, it saved his life.
But also, it brings to the front Jacob's trick.
Yes.
He was never honest with anybody.
No. And it's almost, well, Laban's done this to me, so I'll do this to him, and that'll be okay.
And I think
Not really.
God said, okay, I'm just gonna use this
Yeah.
to get you going where you need to be.
Yes. Well, yeah. Which he did that with Abraham. He let Abraham pull his little stunts, and he does it. It's interesting what he allows and what he doesn't allow.
Earlier on, that when him and Esau were in the tent, and we said that, well, Jacob was well in the tent, so he learned business. Well, he was out there for 14 years.
Yeah, at least.
And so I don't know if Laban is out there all the time. Laban said, oh, look, I got it on myself. I'm smart. But if you're the one who's on the ground doing everything.
That's a very good point.
So you know exactly how they breathe, when they do it. And you also know that, well, I understand that when they be all white and everything, and it looks good on the outside, but there's almost some kind of defect to it. So if you understand the person, maybe what they would like, well then, okay, you can have all of this, and I'll take that. He thinks he's doing something, but he already knows because he's been doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. With him being the tent dweller, which is where all the business would have been done, he's probably been doing Laban's business all along. Taking the sheep and the goats to town, selling them, buying them. So he really does know what's best, what's not best. And Laban probably, I'm not going to say he doesn't, but it'd be a fair guess that he doesn't. Because obviously he didn't have the riches before Jacob got there. But I agree, Ted. I think there's so much to the fact that God is all over this. I mean, for us to think it sticks really happening, it's really not. But
No matter what they did, he had an option B. God was one step ahead of them all the time. He knew what they were going to do.
yeah.
All the way from Abraham on up.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, to me, it's if I was going to build a country, a nationality of people, that's been the last 12 people I would,
Or allowed to be a part of it for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob would have been the first one to cut off. Let the earth open up and swallow.
Yeah.
But he took the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Which goes to show that no matter how bad we are, we can always do it. We
Yes.
can always save us. We can always change us.
Yeah, that's a good point to consider in all of this, especially as we start learning more about these sons and how amazing they are, is the fact that God does choose to use the worst. And Paul talks about it. He uses the weak to defy the strong, for sure. Yep. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I found one theory about
Ooh.
this creation was that it could have been something else stimulate them so much.
much had caused them to have what like.
Okay. So there's something about the sticks that would get them kind of in the mood going.
And that be more active.
Huh. I wonder if they're.
It's all being like if he knew the sheep well enough, if he knew that this all white sheep does give off sheep that aren't white.
Right.
Or stuck or whatever. You get them, it sticks out, they do whatever to stimulate it.
Yeah, and Mark, that's such a good point. That goes back to what you were saying is he's been with these sheep day in and day out. Like he knows who's what gives what, and how this works. And so he's paying attention all the way through. But as you were saying that, I wonder, because you know how you can peel back bark off a fresh branch and it gives an odor. I wonder if there's something in that. Can we please stop talking? Can we talk about something else? But yeah, I mean, there's got to be something. There has to be something to that. or else they wouldn't do it. I mean,
But even he was still in modern times, right now, animal husbandry, that's what you're doing. You're actually looking for.
you're paying attention, yeah.
You're looking for the results in cattle that you want to breed again.
Yes,
You're not going to breed.
right,
Like ground split. You get ground split every time.
right.
They won't breed them.
Right. They don't want to mix them, yeah, for sure. Which I'm glad you said that, because if we go back and read this, he stays there for a while. He's not just waiting for one time, because for the deer, the rut happens basically once a year for the most part. And so with these sheep and goats, a lot of times sheep have two. It's a fall and spring. And so if he's waiting to figure out which one, this is some time that's passing. This isn't just I'll be here for another month. This is a while. Hey, George.
So tired, he probably all that attention to the goats.
He's going.
You remember my rule when I don't repeat stuff? Anybody else? Feel you're quiet tonight, Ed. You got anything, you guys? Y'all make a pact back there? You're not saying that tonight?
No, I think the point is maybe it's not so much the fact that the range is called in expecting but it was more than that weekend. And it's causing to have more land, goods and stuff.
So it's not just about getting them to have the babies. It's we're going to ramp it up. We're going to increase this thing. Which that would make sense if he's on a time crunch. Like we got to get this thing going. Like I got to get my stockpile up quick here. Sure, yeah. That's somebody else said that already. Yes, that was their mandrakes.
Also, pure white ones, they're probably pretty much inbred. So that's why they're weaker and not as good. Where the speckled ones, the spotted ones are the diverse.
Sure. Yeah, I wish I could make a comment on that. I literally have zero clue about any of that. Zero. Yeah.
Very quickly, I just found a science experiment.
Oh, gosh.
That said that there is a gene that, depending upon the mother's diet while she's pregnant, if they have this gene, it will influence the color of the animal. Now, I haven't verified this, but they are saying that they found it in mice, and this is specifically talking about. They said, here's how science shows Jacob's situation.
I gotcha. So it could be something in those.
But again, that's just I wouldn't call it empirical information.
Okay. Interesting. Huh. Is that going to be one of those questions we're going to ask when we get up there, or does it really matter? Stephen? I thought that too, yeah. Yeah, it flavors the water. Huh. That's true. That would be a good reason as to why he's pulling the bark back to where it could get in there faster. It could be. I'm sorry, I'm filtering. You're talking. Anything else?
We talk about the tree.
No, we cannot. Nope. No, because we're not peeling that bark back on that one. Any other thoughts? You get out early. That went way quicker than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. 4 separate women. Yeah. Yeah. That one is astounding to me. And again, it goes back to what Ted was talking about, that it's the way that God chooses to do things proves to us that it's about him and not us. For sure. But yeah, 12 tribes, 4 women, 1 dad. They're all over the place. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was Judah. Yeah. I have an answer. Hopefully they'll match. Hopefully it's not on that first part or the second part. Mm-hmm. I would think not. I would think it'd be kind of in a cluster, like a tent city. I really do think they each had their own separate tent. Like Jacob had his own. Zilpah probably got her own, which is why you're coming into my tent tonight. Okay. Whoa. Non-repeatable. Anything else, please? All right. Everybody okay getting out early? I don't want to get into 31 yet. I know we always have time, but I'm not ready. I don't like flying by my seat with pants too much. Yes, ma'am, Miss Sharon. Please. A 100%. Yes, I have no problem whatsoever just laying on the fact that it's exactly how God intended it to be. The reason I try to enter into those conversations is twofold. One, it's kind of a fun thing to talk about, to think about, even though we won't really have an answer. And 2, you were already thinking it. People were already wondering why it's the sticks. So that's kind of why I entertain and let it go on for a little while, because it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's things that we should talk about. But in the end, it's really how God wanted it to be. It's not about the sticks at all, for sure. It is. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And doing that, so I kind of went to, so when did that no longer become okay? You know, and then it's like how it's gone now, because somebody would have lost their life, you know, if stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that God ever was really just okay with polygamy. He pretty clearly made it one woman with one man, and we kind of took it in different directions. But later on, it kind of comes back to this is the way that it's supposed to be. So it's kind of one of those things where we make a mess of things, and he chooses to work with it because it's about his plan, not ours, and he's going to accomplish his goal no matter what. And so, yeah, but I agree. I don't know that I could have. I don't know. It's just foreign for us to think about this, that it would be okay that if Sally can't have kids, she goes to her sister and says, hey, can you sleep with my husband so he can have a kid? No. No, thank you. I married you. But to them, okay, no big deal. Great, let's have kids. Because it wasn't about the act of sex as the way that we make it out to be. It was about building the legacy, building the family, having more children. Kind of. I mean, it yeah. This was a fun conversation. Nobody else got hot but me? There are certain things I don't mind talking about. That's not one of them.
Well, in 30 chapters, we've gone from Adam and Eve being fruitful and multiplying
Yep.
to Cain and Seth knowing their wives. So I guess that would be the sister, whatever.
Mhm.
Just two people. One of these you got to deal with separate. As time goes on, after the flood, all battle in the Lord increase that you're no longer
Mhm.
to be because everybody's
Yep.
multiplied by that time. And now the marriage then still is made up, but as we see when it comes a little bit further on, that's also still stuff. So it's like, as we go from the beginning, all the way from the third chapter, you see, okay, no more. Okay, no more.
Yeah.
Okay, no more. So that'll probably be occur.
Yeah, probably will. We're good with that. Not anymore. Let's stop that. Let's do something different for sure. Yep. Any other thoughts? Trevor's like, no, please. All right, let me pray for you. God, you're good. Thanks for just a good hearty conversation. Thanks for being so amazing and awesome. And thank you for being so patient and kind and choosing to work with the difficult things of life and our mistakes and the way that we give things up. And yet your plan is still accomplishable even with us. So thank you for what Jesus has already accomplished and the way that you continue to play it out through the power of your Holy Spirit. Bless us as we go home. Keep us safe as we travel in the fog and allow our hearts to be so in tune with you that we can serve you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength the rest of the week. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a good night. See you next week.